Thank you for joining the Smithsonian National Museum of American Indians Youth in Action. Youth in Action is an ongoing series investigating the work of Native activists and changemakers as they strive to work on issues facing their communities. For Women's History Month, this Youth in Action, Digital Futures for Women, is dedicated to exploring the way young Indigenous women are creating space for themselves and others in the technology industry. Before we start, we'd like to gratefully acknowledge the Indigenous communities on whose ancestral homelands we gather, as well as the vibrant and diverse Native communities who continue to make their homes here today. We'll start by introducing our moderator, April Armijo. April is a passionate STEMinist, indigitizer, and Indigenous business advocate, deploying her tech and business expertise to engage, inform, and empower Indigenous communities. Fueled by her education and the challenges she observes and experiences within the tech industry, April is continuously driven to emphasize and disrupt patriarchal patterns of power and empower systematically excluded groups using STEM and entrepreneurship as a catalyst for generational wealth. April, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, ang gwatsi halpa. She April Armijo yen she. Ado kawe ta esta. Tapaha nishla. Ado kutswash dishta. My name is April Armijo, and my Indian name is Kawe Tata, which translates to falling snow or snowflakes. I am from the Navajo Nation and the Pueblo of Acoma, and I currently live on the traditional homelands of the Mia Mia, Shawanaki, Shawnee, Kaskaskia, and Osage Nations in Dayton, Ohio. I have been in the technology space for over 22 years, starting from the moment I built my first computer when I was in 8th grade. Since then, I have accumulated degrees in multiple fields of technology, provided technical solutions to nonprofits, helped grow an IT startup to a multi-million-dollar business, and I continuously strive to inspire Indigenous students, professionals, and tribes to engage with STEM opportunities through digital spaces. I also developed a platform called Ambitious Ancestors that amplifies and provides access to Indigenous small businesses, mentors, and advocates. I am so excited to facilitate today's discussion on Native women in tech, digital futures, especially during Women's History Month, and truly honored to be in this space with two young Indigenous women who are steadfast in their passions, advocating for equitable and innovative learning solutions and non-traditional pathways into tech. To give context to our discussion today, it is imperative to know that women take up less than 20% in tech spaces and Natives less than 0.005%, which means the numbers for Native women in tech are minuscule. In 2021, only 104 Indigenous women received degrees in computer science. Those numbers perpetuate an already common theme that surrounds our Indigenous communities. We are practically invisible. Now, as citizens of the 21st century, we are all part of a society that is encompassed by the need for ever-changing technology, rapid skills to harness those technologies, and a societal desire to connect and communicate with each other in ways that are digitized. But when Indigenous women occupy this space, something else happens. We bring the values of our ancestors, the same resilience that helped us survive colonialism and the traditional knowledge that has helped us adapt and thrive in the spaces that we occupy. We are the backbone of our communities, the protectors of our youth, and the force that gives life to future generations of stewards of this land. This inherent way of being brought to the tech space opens up this realm of possibility where we bring the ability to solve unique challenges, and we'll be diving into how these two young Indigenous women are doing just that. I will give a brief introduction on today's panelists, and then we'll let them introduce themselves. To start, we have Natalie Contreras, a program manager for the Digital Academy program at Adobe and leader in the social impact space, who is passionate about strengthening connections and increasing access to opportunities between innovation and creativity, specifically for Black, Indigenous, and people of color. Natalie, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Nadi Erandeski. Good morning, everyone. My name is Natalie. I am currently based in the San Francisco Bay Area in so-called San Francisco, also traditionally known as Yelamu, the territories of the Ohlone people here of the San Francisco Bay Area. My people are from the regions of Durango, Michoacan, and Jalisco, Mexico, which pertain to the Purepecha, Coca, and Tepehuán peoples. I'm really excited to be joining the session today and share a little bit of insight on the different programs and projects that I've been a part of, particularly pertaining to increasing representation for BIPOC community in the space of innovation. My background is also as an educator. I've been a multidisciplinary creative. Currently, I manage a program at Adobe to increase more representation for individuals in the tech space, but I've also served a lot of different Bay Area organizations and local tech initiatives that are motivated to develop access again and representation for communities of color in tech. I was originally introduced actually to the Digital Academy through my participation in a local tech org called Hack the Hood. And since then, I participated in programs through multiple orgs, such as the Bay Area Video Coalition, Tech SF, the Youth Impact Hub, and the Caper Center, and more. My goal is to really encourage individuals to pursue a career in the creativity space and innovation. But I'm also a current board member for an organization called Natives in Tech, which led a partnership with Indigenous AI to support the very first Lakota AI Code Camp in South Dakota. And that was honestly probably a very educational moment in terms of the possibilities that exist when we have a community of Indigenous educators that are coming from these backgrounds to teach Indigenous students what it would look like to bring solutions into the community to apply to skill sets that we want to retain and we want to preserve for our future generations. Additionally, to close off, I'm also one of the co-founders for establishing Adobe's Indigenous First Nations Employee Network, which is super important as it's currently developing pathways, and our aim is to increase access to scholarship and apprenticeship programs for First Nations, Indigenous people, and more. So I'm excited to be on this panel with you all this morning, and also to be alongside just really powerful femme leaders in STEM that I really look up to. I've been reading more about your work, and being able to meet you in person has just been an awesome blessing because you're so humble and super down to earth. And so I like that through the virtual communities, we may be in different places, but I feel like this natural connection to you all just because I feel like we're trying to do similar things in the spaces we're a part of. So yeah, just very thankful to be here, and thank you.
Thank you so much, Natalie. It was really wonderful meeting you too. I'm so glad that we were able to connect. And we'll go to our next panelist. We also have Danielle Boyer, a young Ojibwe robotics inventor and advocate for youth who has been teaching kids since she was 10 years old. In 2019, she created the STEAM Connection, a minority and youth-led charity that has reached hundreds of thousands of children worldwide with technical education. She has been named one of People Magazine's Girls Changing the World, a MIT Solve Indigenous Communities Fellow, a L'Oreal Paris Woman of Worth. She was also invited to the White House for the MTV Youth Action Forum and is the Verizon Forward for Good winner. Daniel, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thank you. Bonjour, hello. My name is Danielle Boyer. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a 21-year-old Ojibwe robotics inventor and educational advocate. I'm from the Sioux tribe in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan and live between Metro Detroit and Southern California now. I work to increase access to culturally competent and representative technical education through robots that I design, manufacture, and distribute for free. I've been working in education and tech for over 10 years now. Miigwech, thank you.
Thank you. And I'm so happy I was able to connect with you earlier this year too. I really love the robots that you create. My daughters, got 2 of your robots and they are crazy about them. And even my oldest joined a tech club. So I attribute a lot of that to your efforts. So thank you so much. And it's wonderful to have this conversation with you as well. So let's go ahead and dive into our conversation. We'll start off with, I think it'll be helpful to hear your journeys into tech, how you decided that you wanted to be in the tech field, and background on just what got you there. So we'll start off with Natalie first.
Yeah, thanks for that question. I think that You would imagine somewhere like the SF Bay Area, aka Silicon Valley, to have endless opportunities for communities of color, given that we're so embedded in the culture and the landscape here, just as a people. But I would say that that still is very much an uphill battle. And part of my involvement with one of these tech organizations that I mentioned was because at the time I was really struggling to afford my cost of living as like a single independent woman. And I was relying on working service industry jobs. So working as a server at restaurants in the evenings and taking courses in the daytime to just increase my skills and knowledge and really think about where do I see myself fitting into place here. And at the time, there was a flyer that I came across that was announcing a program for 6 weeks for youth to learn coding and introductory tech skills. And they would offer you a scholarship or a stipend, as well as a laptop. And I didn't have a laptop at that moment. Actually, I had gone to go pick up one of my checks from the restaurant. And in the split moment, my car had gotten broken into and my backpack was gone. And so was my laptop, my hard drive. So I had to start over again. And I didn't let that stop me, but it was kind of a very interesting moment that at the very time I needed a computer, I didn't have one. And then there was an opportunity to get one with a catch. I would go learn these intro to tech skills. I remember I was at the restaurant I worked at and I was getting a phone call. So I ran out to the side door that was in the civic center, like / Tenderloin area of San Francisco. Pretty intense. I go outside and one of the instructors calls me and says, "Hey, we got your application. We want to invite you to start this program. You've been accepted. Can you let me know by tomorrow if you'll plan to show up for the course?" And as I was talking to him, my manager ran out and he was like, "Natalie, what are you doing outside? Service starts in 5 minutes." And he just totally flipped out on me. And in that moment, I had this feeling of, you know what? I don't care if service starts in 5 minutes, because as much as I like who I work with, because it was mostly, people of color that are working, especially like in the back of house for restaurants. Even though I felt the camaraderie there, I knew that because I had an opportunity to gain more skills and learn that this is something that I was feeling resistance to pursuing. So I knew I had to do it, because I think that through our journeys as women in the spaces that we're a part of, there's always a lot of no energy or distractions. I don't know where that comes from. It might be a legacy of colonialism, to be honest, but I took the moment as an opportunity to see I am sitting in these spaces and serving these tech startup founders, and a lot of engineers are coming here to spend money, and I'm looking at who they are and reading the host stand of who's coming in, like the CEO of Pinterest came one time. So it was really interesting for me that while I was going through this program with Hack the Hood, I was learning about the fundamentals of what are startups, what is the tech ecosystem about, what's the history of it, like what's the difference between hardware and software, how did the internet become created, things that I had grown up around in this space, but didn't really put much thought behind. And then here I was in the evenings serving these people that were creating legacy for the years ahead. So I think when I think of what was the motivation to be in the space, it was lack of access and knowing that there was something unjust about the fact that there's a lot of talent that is sourced from outside and outside of the country, specifically if we're speaking of the US territories. Meanwhile, our own communities are suffering and struggling because it's just an afterthought to include them in those opportunities to increase their skill set and contribute meaningfully, not just to companies that they may work at, but to their communities and applying those solutions in real tangible ways. So I didn't know all that was going to come from it, but that's what happened.
I love that. And I think that speaks to the whole idea of how Indigenous women in these spaces bring those values of, taking care of community first. And that's what we use to solve problems. It's kind of being mindful of that. And I love that. So thank you for sharing your journey into tech and what motivated you to get here. Danielle, same question for you. What brought you into tech, and if you could share your journey into that, that would be great.
Yeah, thank you so much. I actually got started when I was 10 years old, so a real long time ago, because of my little sister. She was really interested in things like robots and science, but a lot of the educational programs were too expensive for us. Like one educational robot for the robotics program was $500. And that just wasn't accessible to us, and it was really discouraging. I remember I was at Costco one day and I saw animal puppets like on the shelf. And I remember pulling my mom aside and asking her, I was like, can I teach an animal science class? I don't know why I had that idea, but it suddenly came to my mind. And she was like, dude, no, you're 10 years old. What are you talking about? And I was like, no, seriously, like I'll write lesson plans. I'll do it. I'll make it happen. And I ended up teaching 25 kindergartners for a semester-long science class at age 10, which is crazy. And it opened my eyes to not only education, but that I could do more about the problems that I saw around me than I thought. And when I got to high school, I've been homeschooled most of my life. I got to high school and I really wanted to pursue robotics because of my sister. And it was super expensive, so it was a lot to be able to be there in the first place. I was one of the only girls, and I got bullied super badly the whole time. It was so bad that I even got stalked with drones and even have harassment to this day. And I ended up quitting the robotics team and joining another one, and pretty much the same stuff happened again. People did not treat me well, and it wasn't a safe space to learn. So when I graduated, I spent a long time like researching robotics and learning about how to design them. And I ended up founding my organization, the STEAM Connection, when I was 18, because I wanted to create safe learning spaces, especially for other girls like me. Because it's not fair that you have to go into a learning space and not be welcome there. And it's not fair to not have representative or culturally competent education. So that's kind of what started my journey, and it was fueled by lots of anger, to be honest. And I'm glad for that, because I've been able to reach so many kids now with robots, and it's been a huge relief. But yeah, at the STEAM Connection, we're actually minority and youth led, which is super cool. And we've reached hundreds of thousands of kids. Our focus is on language revitalization. And as I said before, we design, manufacture, and distribute robots for free, which is so exciting. Robots are so expensive. And I think every child deserves to access them and access awesome learning opportunities. And that's something that I take a lot of pride in doing. I cook up the robots myself in my apartment. But it's exciting because at the STEAM Connection, we're able to focus like on the future, kind of, in my mind, ushering in a new age of education via personal and wearable robotics. Like this little dude right here, this is one of our language learning robots. We use also like artificial intelligence and augmented reality, and that's super exciting, but we're also informed by the past and the present by utilizing traditional knowledge to uplift and protect Indigenous communities with an emphasis on language. And to me, even though my journey came from some difficult things, I'm so excited looking into the future and looking to see the future of tech, especially for our youth.
Yes, and I think you are truly providing that solution or the safe space for children to learn, even if it's at home and they get to watch the YouTube video of you putting together the robots. I think that in itself is something, it provides that safe space for them, especially seeing someone like themselves do that. So thank you so much for your work in that. So the next question I have is, now that you are in these spaces, you are working in tech, and I really want to understand how you connect and bring your whole self to your work, and even make the case for opening the door for others in spaces that tend to value the status quo. So let's start with Danielle this time.
I thought that this was a really interesting question because it's a really hard one, to be honest. Standing up for myself and my community often means that I get cut out of opportunities that others have. It can be really discouraging. Recently, I was at a youth activism event that was super racist, and it had everything from inaccurate Native representation to being like called hostile and threatening, to people even refusing to acknowledge me or my friend's existence. They wouldn't even make eye contact with me. We got greeted by a statue of Columbus as well, and it was just overall a really traumatizing thing. And it really set me back a lot in my mental health and emotionally. And now I'm seeing these same people who mistreated us using Native trauma for their own gain in media campaigns. And it reminded me that sometimes some doors aren't going to be opened for a really long time. I think it's important that we stand up for ourselves, that we stand up for our communities, but also protect our energy and don't be afraid to leave spaces that aren't safe for us if we can. It's hard to be reminded of that because there are so many doors I think we want to open and we want to open for others. And it's hard to strike that balance of which spaces are safe for us and which spaces are not. And you don't often know until you're like in it, you know? But being reminded of that, it's scary. And it reminds me of how much I love my community, how much I love my students, and how much I value safe spaces, because a lot of the corporate world, a lot of the status quo is not safe. And it can be very damaging emotionally to advocate for yourself sometimes. And so I think striking that balance is important, but it can take a lot out of you.
That is a wonderful perspective. I love that, because I sometimes feel like I should be, advocating more for not just myself, but for others. And sometimes that does weigh heavy on your mental health. So a wonderful perspective. Thanks for sharing that. Natalie, how about you? How do you bring your full self to your work or make the case for opening the doors for others in spaces that tend to value status quo?
Given that this is going to be on a public platform, my answer to that would be the how is unapologetically, and being okay with reprogramming the way I view myself in space and belonging. I know that sounds technical, but it's intentionally said. I think that what most people might not be aware of or forget is that it's not so much about being in these spaces. It's also, as Danielle mentioned, the way that what happens when we are finally in those spaces. It's not like getting into particular environments is the end of the story or the chapter book. It's actually just the beginning of a new layer of complexity. So when we enter into spaces, given our histories and the impact of what we know, those things are also carried and translated into those environments. And they come out sometimes in ways that are not supportive and are violent. They may not be physically by nature, but psychologically and spiritually. So we do have a different challenge, a unique challenge as people that are not heavily represented in the space when we show up. And that brings about a certain kind of uncomfortability. And as leaders, we tend to be the ones to take the first hit of that. And I say that because I also share common, instances that have occurred to me in those spaces as well, from people that are meant to be supportive and help you through that journey. And instead, sometimes that's not the case. So the way that I bring myself into the work that I do, it can be as little as, I think, this is hard. This is a hard question. Every space that we enter is going to affect and influence our comfortability and how we present ourselves and how we act. And that's draining. And I think there's a couple of theorists that talk about it, like W.E.B. Du Bois, with this idea of double consciousness. I think that might be, is that him or is that Frantz Fanon? It's one of them, both great. And it's this idea, I really liked going through some of these organizations that I learned from, because integrated into our curriculum was this idea of teaching participants code switching and how to navigate the double consciousness, that we do have to wear different suits for the different spaces that we're in. And some of those suits are spiritual armor when we're walking into spaces, recentering, focusing in, calling in that protection, calling in those elevated ancestors from our lineages to really help us and guide us and be there, so that we can continue the work. Because I think that something that I see just in this space and like the women here on this call is that I get the sense that a lot of the ideas that come to us are our own. And then there's also this motivating ness behind us that maybe we can't explain, but it's an impulse of people before us that want us to create this in the now. I don't know why that is, but it wants to be. So I think not letting those obstacles overcome us so that we can be in that creative space and tap into, I think, as also femmes, and this idea of centering women, Indigenous women as life givers in our communities goes hand in hand with allowing the space for us to create these new ways of thinking and integrating these new technologies. They're very similar. So I think the way that we show up in spaces, again, unapologetically, and not taking no for an answer, because every no is a potential yes. And yeah, I think I love that question, actually. Thank you for asking that one.
No problem. And I liked, meeting you in person and seeing just how bold and just, outgoing you were. And I thought about, seeing you in action in tech as a person as the person I was maybe 10 years ago. I would have loved to see just that liveliness. And I hope that it never gets lost in this, in our efforts to change these spaces. So I really wanted to highlight that. Thank you both for your wonderful answers. The next question that I have is for Natalie. So in working with a large digital creative community, what are ways you have tied working tech back to Indigenous communities? And I think you have several projects going on with all of your extra things that you have on the side. So it'd be wonderful to understand how that works.
I think the question is twofold, because on one end, we're dealing with the high underrepresentation of people like us in the space creating the technologies. So in the example for Adobe, software company that deals specifically with the creativity and digital art of a lot of different mediums and spaces, anything from, marketing, video editing for like big industry, graphic design, visuals that are being integrated into new mediums like AR, VR. One part, it's going to be who are the individuals creating these technologies and who are the folks that are using the platforms, and also how accessible is it for communities to even be able to learn. So for myself, I took a class on just photography, but I learned the basics of Photoshop. And so because that was offered where I was at, I wanted to take that class. It gave me the tools and the skill set to understand, what does it mean to bring an idea from your mind to life in a digital format? So just really playing with that limitless possibility, I think is a great space for that. On the flip side, when we think of the underrepresentation, it's pretty hard to always hear that there's only a certain percentage of Native people, and of that, even less is women. That seems very, you would think, well, then what's the point? We're obviously not there. We're maybe not supposed to be there. And I just simply don't take that as an answer, because foundational to a lot of concepts, even in computing, with the concept of the number 0, that is dating back several millennia to the very place that we're on, which is Turtle Island. So I'm sure there were women at that time. Our whole civilization and population in the world is dependent upon that sacredness. So why wouldn't we be able to be integrated into these formats of thinking and innovation? Indigenous people have always been there, and if Indigenous people's always been there, women have definitely also always been there. The reason why we may not see it that way is because it wasn't written that way. So part of us reimagining is writing ourselves into those stories, writing ourselves in the active creators that are dreaming up these new ways and integrating them in the present. And I think that the way that we bring in these Indigenous values is also where we're not necessarily doing this for the now. We're understanding and placing ourselves in the now as agents of what has happened before us, who we come from, and people we will never meet in the future that we know we have a calling to create infrastructure for those generations. So there's a little bit of, I guess that's a gift, and I think that also goes back into us as people. I like to think about that principle and the idea of gifting. They always go back and say that the person who has the most is the one who not has a lot of things, material things, but who is able to release that and share that amongst their community and with others. And so I think that's a format in a way that we're doing that kind of work. Yeah, that's a big one. I like that. Also, even a lot of the terminology and the language on the way that servers are created and like information is distributed back and forth, that's like, it's modeling us as people. Like, people think machines are separate from humans. The human body is a machine as well. So it's not going to be far off from, the reason we have these things now is because it's part of human consciousness. We want these technologies to come about, I guess, at this time when we're thinking about, I was listening to a discussion like through this presentation about how we're in Web 2, but we're slowly kind of moving into Web 3 and what that means and what that's going to look like. And the fact that we have young Indigenous creatives kind of leading that in a lot of ways, I'm really interested to see how that's going to play out. And it's not something that's going to happen way later in the future. It's already happening.
I agree. It'll be interesting to see what solutions are created out of this generation. I mean, look at you two. I think that speaks for itself. So let's get into a question for Danielle. So Danielle, you did start your own nonprofit, which that's amazing. Every time I think of that, it's just like, wow. So I wanted to ask, for those who are interested in starting a nonprofit or company, can you share some lessons you learned from your journey that you wish you knew from the start?
I love this question. It's been nothing but learning for me, to be honest. There's been a lot of lessons, mostly hard lessons, because I actually dropped out of college. I was pursuing both electrical engineering and mechanical engineering. And at a point, I would sit in class and I would just think about robots. And I have a learning disability too. So it got to a point where I was like, I just need to go and I need to make stuff. I can make things better than I can take tests. And so I ended up dropping out. And it was really hard at first because there's just a lot you don't know when you're not in school, starting businesses, all these things. Like, it was a lot of new skills for me that I didn't see in the environment around me. So I had to learn on my own. And through that, I asked a lot of questions. I would spam people on Instagram and ask them questions. I was like, why are you using those type of servo motors? What type of materials are you using? How did you learn how to 3D print? All these things. And I was able to bring together an amazing group of mentors that I've learned from, most of whom are Native. And being able to ask questions and learn from them has been so helpful in helping me build a business and build up a team who are so supportive. Another thing that has been really important and kind of a lesson that I've learned extremely the hard way is that I'm very much like a stereotypical nerd. I like bury myself in my computer and I work for days straight. Like I will forget to eat, all these things, and I'm just working on new robot designs and curriculum. This is super productive, right? But I wish I had learned to build in balance sooner. To spend more time with friends, to focus on my mental health, to eat better, to exercise, and to say no to things more. Building in good habits, it takes a really long time because your work, it's never going to slow down. You have to start doing it now before things really take off, or you're never going to get a chance and you're going to burn out. And I think you need to build it into your life because eventually it's going to be built into your workplace culture as well. If you treat yourself well, if you respect yourself and you respect your own boundaries, the people around you are going to see that and they're going to prioritize that hopefully as well. My mom always says that in order to pour into others, you need to pour into yourself as well. And I've always had a really hard time listening to that and to taking that advice, especially because I struggle with things like complex post-traumatic stress disorder and depression. And so it can be hard to get up in the morning sometimes. So building in that balance is pivotal to my success at my organization and it enables me to build good robots and to do cool things. And so I think it's about knowing yourself, knowing your limits, and knowing what you don't know. Being able to ask questions and not being embarrassed of that. But I think ultimately focus on building things with and for community. That looks like many different things. For some, it's robots. For others, students I'm working with, it's AI systems. It's so cool. But focus on yourself, focus on your community, and the rest will follow.
That is wonderful advice. I love that. And I think it can kind of lead into the next one. So we often only talk about our successes, but I would like to ask about a time when you had to really pick yourself up. Can you talk about a moment such as this and what you did to overcome it?
Yeah, so as I said, I struggle a lot with mental health and like getting out of bed is really hard. Especially when you run a business and there's not a lot of structure always. It can be very stressful. It can be a lot of pressure, especially I do stuff in the media, things like that. It's a lot of pressure not only to represent yourself well, but also your community well. It's a lot all at once. I think every single day I have to pick myself up for different reasons. I think a lot of us here, we've been through really hard things with ourselves, with our families. It's a lot. It's a lot to exist in this world as an Indigenous person. It's a lot to exist in this world as a woman. For me, it's a lot to exist in this world as a queer woman as well. And so it's like balancing all of these intersections at once. Sometimes I just go out in the world and I'm mad. I look to my elders and I see them. They handle things so well. They don't handle it with as much anger as I have. And they're like, you'll outgrow it, you know? And I'm like, when am I going to outgrow it? But my grandma told me to put like affirmations on the bathroom mirror, actually. She's like, remind yourself why you do what you do and why it matters to you and why it matters to all of us. Actually, I put them on my fridge instead, and I added pictures of my students and my robots and my friends and my family. And that has been so amazing to remind myself every day. It's like, even when there's difficult days, even when I'm having a depressive episode, I'm reminded why I love what I do, and it keeps me going every day when I struggle. Because it can be really, really difficult, and existing in a lot of like corporate spaces, I know that I have to exist within these spaces to get the funding and things to be able to give the robots away for free. And that I have to do things like public speaking and sharing what we do, not only to advocate for our communities and to get more students interested in learning about it, but also to bring in that funding and to bring in that support. And it can be, for the lack of a better word, a little soul-sucking at times. The thing I love the most is to go and to teach the kids. And so I have to remind myself that the 2 weeks I spend in a corporate space is going to be followed up by teaching the kids and spending time with them, and that it may not feel great now, but it will later. And I will see those results later. Even corporate events that are supposed to be safe spaces, they never really are. I remember I was giving a panel recently, and another panelist tried to relate to me by talking about how, as a child, his family, quote, saved like drunk Indians. And it was crazy to me because it was an anti-racist and Indigenous futures event. And I was hopeful that things would be different. And I think that I carry that hope into a lot of things, and I'm almost always let down. And it can be really, really discouraging. And that on top of mental health stuff, sometimes it can be a really big punch, you know? And so for me, I have to constantly recenter myself as to why I'm doing what I'm doing and why it matters, and to surround myself with friends who understand where I'm coming from, to surround myself with family. But yeah, it can be a really hard thing to balance.
And what I really admire about the youth of today is your ability to just immediately recognize and confront questions and question systems that you see that are causing harm. I think that's what I've seen in both of you. And it's really admirable, and just continue doing that. We desperately need that in these spaces, which also brings me back to a question for Natalie. So what elements or factors have you observed to be critical for Indigenous women to get into tech? And how can we as professionals and allies begin to break down the stereotypes of tech that may present barriers for entry?
This might actually also be partially an answer for the very first question of what was your journey into tech? Well, I only kind of described the part about going to this nonprofit that taught me intro to tech skills. What I failed to mention is that it was actually through this organization that they referred me to apply for a scholarship program that Adobe was hosting to cover the cost of tuition to attend a 12-week bootcamp immersive to learn software engineering fundamentals. It included a stipend and the opportunity to potentially interview with teams at Adobe for placement for a 3-month summer internship. For me, that was something totally unheard of. I didn't even think at the beginning when I was considering applying, I thought, should I apply? And then I said, well, if I don't apply, it's a guaranteed no. But if I apply and I get the scholarship, then I'll have that stipend that comes with the scholarship. And that's more resources than I currently have access to. And say I do interview and maybe I land a role on a team. Maybe I could intern as well. And if that goes well, maybe there's a role for me post-internship. Well, the role didn't happen right away post-internship. I finished that, but I did get the scholarship. And I'm bringing up this example because I think that when we don't know what's out there, what's possible, we won't necessarily consider that as a potential track for ourselves or others. It may not even be the right fit for us, but we may know someone that might be interested. What I really appreciate about my journey through that program is that there was a lot of uncertainty, but what was always shared to me was the idea of growth mindset. A lot of the reason why students particularly struggle when we're going through traditional education systems is because, one, they weren't designed to foster our creativity and who we are as people. It's kind of very normative and restrictive. But the reason I really lean towards innovation, especially digital media, is because of the endless opportunity and possibilities that existed, and how it encouraged me not to just be a critical thinker, but to think, why do I want to create this and why is this significant? So essentially, I think my biggest thing here is in overcoming obstacles like that, we really have to see opportunity. My point here is that when individuals see a pathway as an opportunity, that's the best case scenario, because if they didn't even know that was a possibility for them, they weren't going to choose it. That's one part. But having opportunity alone is not as impactful. What you need is other people in those spaces to be a signal for folks that may also want to join and participate said communities or scholarship programs, right? In the example for Digital Academy, we've had very, the least amount of individuals that have gone through the program are self-identified Indigenous or First Nations people. And I really want to work to change that. And it's difficult because our communities have a unique set of challenges. Not saying that others don't face similar things, but it's different. And I think that there can be more efforts to create inclusivity. So part of the work that I'm currently doing is creating a network at a big corporate entity isn't necessarily the goal. It's what does that space then create for other people in access. So yes, if there isn't a table, you build the table. And then once you have the table, you think about how you want to organize and structure that. What I really appreciate about being given the opportunity to lean into my own leadership is, if we didn't have something, what would it look to have it? And what are the values and principles that we want to bring in to create a safe space for people? That comes directly from being in spaces that were not safe for myself and for others. And I think that even in my own communities, I'm constantly being tasked with keeping it cool when, comments or slights are directed at me because I'm a woman, or because of the way that I look, or the way that I wear my hair. Like, the natural things about me sometimes are subject to hatred, like straight up. I don't have any other word. And it doesn't mean that it doesn't affect me or it doesn't hurt. It just means that it's fuel to really stand up for and defend other people like myself by creating those safe spaces. So I think that a way that we can work towards creating equitable access is making the space is safe and secure. I also bring and integrate a lot of my traditional teachings that I have learned over the years, specifically also with traditional dance. And when you're opening the space up with prayer, like really thinking about clearing the space in that environment, stating your intention of being in that space, making sure that folks are standing up for each other when certain things are said or communicated in a way that may be hurtful in the moment. So because of that, it's very integral to the way that I relate and build relations and relationships with others, and creating a model for a new way that we can do that. I say it because in corporate structures, it's very much the opposite, It's the complete opposite of that. So just learning how to strike the balance and show people that the spaces aren't going to be there for you, but you being in them is going to be the way that they are built. So just showing up is a big critical piece of that.
Yes, show up. I love that. I know we are coming close to our time, but I do want to ask this question because I think it's helpful for those who are watching, or if anyone had a desire to be in this tech space, in these tech spaces. Who are the people that you looked up to? So I would like to know, like, who do you look to? What are the resources that we can access, or how can we get involved on this path towards tech? If you could share any of what has helped you get to where you are, or just, resources that you can provide, that would be wonderful.
Honestly, a lot of the role models and resources I have are from many different places. I look a lot to my family for inspiration. My mom is an artist. My grandma has worked her whole life as a maternal advocate. And looking up to them especially has influenced a lot of how I look at engineering, and seeing it from more of a artistic lens rather than just purely a technical lens, which can be tempting sometimes. But they've also encouraged me to ask a lot of questions and to spam people in the DMs and ask when I don't know things. And I think that's the best resource I can suggest, because you know what you want to do the most. You know what you're interested in. You know what type of people you follow online. DM them, the worst thing they can do is not answer you or say no. Ask those questions, because a lot of the time people are interested in helping or interested in sharing their knowledge, I think that's a beautiful thing. Just ask those questions. For me, a lot of them are technical questions, a lot of coding questions, especially before I was at a point where I was able to hire people or hire consultants and things like that. I just had to ask a lot of people a lot of things, and it was really embarrassing what I didn't know. I think it was stressful too, because I felt a lot of pressure as a girl who's in engineering to know everything, because a lot of the guys would just wait around for me to say something wrong and totally roast me. I watch some of the YouTube videos I've been in back when I read the comments, and people are so mean for no good reason. One, don't ever do that. Two, believe in yourself, believe in your abilities, and it doesn't matter where you're getting like your technical knowledge from, as long as your stuff is working. If you get it from Instagram, if you get it from your friends, if you get it from YouTube, that's just as valid as learning it in a college, you know? And I think that's an important thing to remember, is to draw inspiration from those around you, to build up like friend groups and things of people who inspire you and people you look up to and want to learn from, and also to keep on learning every single day.
I agree. That's why I follow both of you. Okay, Natalie, what about you?
I will agree with Danielle. As a visual artist and a visual learner, I go through different spaces and I'm picking up gems here and there. And I'm thinking about, okay, who are the people that I know, and how did those people communicate to me that they know what they know? In the same way, I need to make sure that I create that for myself, so people know, oh, this person's interested in this. I can make this introduction. Something that I'm thankful for the orgs I participated in was learning simple skills like that. So like, what are soft skills like in the environments that you're a part of, and networking. The reason why disrupting hiring practices in technology is important is because we can have all the degrees and all the requirements and we can be top stellar candidate. But if we don't know that person that is the hiring manager or responsible for the teams, they're still going to go for people that look like them and that they know. So what does it mean for us to widen our networks and communicate outward what we're seeking and what we're interested in? We're able to tap into those opportunities, which is what keeps us out most of the time. So really working to change that. And I think also, I'm just here to say, pay the girls. And I say that because there is wage gaps for women. So imagine if you're an Indigenous woman and you want to go into the space, you really got to think about it, because that's going to mean a unique set of challenges. So this is for all the future employers or listeners on this call. If you have Indigenous people on your teams or women, I want you to know that there are unique challenges that we face in our own communities, not to mention the spaces we're a part of, to even show up, to even get up in the morning and be here and take that that energy on some days. So we need your support. And for the younger individuals, maybe, and honestly, not even just younger, anyone at any age can learn these skills and be in this space if they want to. And that's the beauty of it. Growth mindset isn't, oh, I'm too young or too old for this. It's saying growth mindset is not fixed. You're not, this is what I know and this is what it is. It's thinking, what don't I know and how can I get to what I would like to learn about in a curious and inquisitive and fun way, instead of, oh, I don't know that, not a path I can do. Okay, well, just how you went on YouTube and learned all these tutorials for different things, you can go and apply it to learning something that you're passionate and excited about. And additionally, I will say, I think one of the projects that I worked on when I was going through the coding immersive, which was mostly, my class was mostly not women and also mostly non-POC, was that I looked online. At the time, I was only aware of a couple like online communities, like one was Indigenous Goddess Gang on Instagram and others, but I didn't see one for Native women particularly. So one of my first projects was to create a mock website with just general full stack app, create the wireframes, build the front end, and I put together a pretend website for Native women in technology. And I had to go up in front of the class and present this. And I had to present the why. Why did I want to create this particular, what solution did this idea or app bring? So I had to justify my existence in the space in front of my peers and my instructors. But I did it. I did it because I knew that I would have wanted to find something like that online. So I didn't settle for it not existing. I just created a mock-up of what it would look like if it did happen. And I think that's the way we can continue to move forward, is finding solutions and using our creativity. And I can't remember the last part of the question, but all I will say is that I think those are very important things. Oh, people that want to get into tech, going off of what Danielle said, lean into people that you already know who are in the space. Ask for referrals after you speak to them. Hey, do you have 2 more people that I can chat with that you may know or would be great to listen to or learn from? Additionally, integrate yourself. A lot of the stuff that happens virtually and on the web, there's communities for. So reach out and try to either join those communities, whether it's a meetup, whether it's an online community, or if there's a conference being held, go and listen. Make time to be really intentional to listen and pick up gems. With the skills that I learned, I was able to create like a website for folks here in California that were seeking, Indigenous folks that were seeking a website to just be able to capture names and addresses to distribute COVID relief more quickly. So thinking of ways to apply very tangible things for problems that show up in your community. And then the other one would be, don't be afraid to pose questions and think of the limitless. I heard the other day, I want to do and create interesting things with interesting people always as much as possible. So if you can really tap into that, I think that will be good.
Going off of soft skills that you mentioned, Natalie, I think that it's so important for students everywhere to have skills in everything from graphic design to learning how to make your own website to being able to film like a TikTok. It goes beyond just like robot skills and electrical engineering and things like that. Being able to have these kind of software skills helps you advocate for yourself, helps you get the job that you want to get, helps you create the things that you want to create. And the biggest skill that has been of the most benefit to me is computer aided design and 3D printing to be able to create robots. I learned how to use Adobe software at a very young age, and that has always been a huge support for me to be able to make my own brochures, make my own business cards, make stuff for my website, crop the backgrounds out of things. And I learned that I love it a lot. But being able to use those skills and learn things that may feel pointless at the time, it really does come in handy later on, even if it's just making your own business card or knowing what things look good together. I always suggest to people to put together a Pinterest board or a mood board to see like what inspires you and to refresh it now and then, see what your aesthetic is, see what interests you. And that can drive a lot of how you present yourself to the world around you.
Yeah, I think since a lot of people are already using our phones for a lot of things, consider these technology spaces as mind maps for you to access more resources and more education to further whatever it is that you are interested or passionate about. Because at the end of the day, nobody's going to come up with an idea better than you will if it's something that you're excited and passionate about. And additionally, I think that, yeah, Danielle's spot on make the time to learn skills that, because you'll use those over and over again. And it doesn't have to be in any particular niche or set of technology. Like, innovation is wide ranging, and I guess within the last years, only a certain, like 90% of what exists in line has only been created within the last 10 years. So we have a ways to go, and it's only going to develop in complexity. So there's so much opportunity. In fact, that's why there's such a demand for folks to learn these skills, because there is a deficit of skilled talent to be able to do so. That's why there's such a high pay rate for some of these roles even. But I wouldn't stop just at those roles. It's how are you going to integrate it into the spaces you're a part of? And anything you want to learn, you can learn it, literally. So I do want to encourage folks that if they have the opportunity to pursue education in any form, it isn't only exclusive to traditional institutions. We are entering into a new level in which so much is gained through our connections virtually as well. And one of the examples for me personally has been, I'm passionate about the work I do, but I also have friends asking me who are creatives, who are artists, musicians, Indigenous, hey, can you help me put together a website? So what do? I go and I look at websites by industry leaders. I go and I look at Cardi B's website. Why do I look at Cardi B's website? Because I admire Cardi B, because she really is the embodiment of coming from struggle and making her success and who she is her own, and being who she is. And because of her empowerment towards women, really, that, we can overcome the difficult challenges that we face. She has a team to back her. So also, this is new, but who's going to be your team? Who are going to be the people that you lean on? But more so using her as an example of, I didn't know how to come up with something, so I went to seek a model for what could be, but adding my spin to it, right? Adding the creatives that I was working with and incorporating their cultures and who they are as people into the websites, but modeling and being inspired from wireframes that are already in existence of people that I also admire. I don't like to use celebrities as an example, but she didn't start off as a celebrity. She's a regular person that is doing big things in spaces that are, there's a lot of complexity to it. So I wanted to say that. And additionally, the point of having individuals pay close attention to this new landscape with Web 3.0 and VR and AR, specifically when we're talking about artificial intelligence and machine learning as well. I mentioned that there was a presentation that I was listening in on through the Adobe Max conference, and they were discussing the new, imaging software limits and boundaries that are being pushed with programs like DALL-E and others that are really interesting to see if that's where we're starting off at. What do the next 5 to 10 years look like when we reflect on the decade before us in terms of the technological advancements, and where do we fit in that? And I think there's going to be a lot of creators that are going to step forward and integrate also maybe those traditional knowledges in a way that we can ethically perpetuate that information and culture in the future for generations to come. Another area or source of inspiration in terms of mentorship and leadership, given that a lot of the work that I have been doing has been in the San Francisco Bay Area, has also been, when I think about the orgs I participated in, for example, in the East Bay, really thinking about and elevating the leadership of the Black Panther movement and their work that they did to increase access for communities, anything from the free lunch program, which I actually also benefited myself from as a youth, and others such as the American Indian movement with the occupation of Alcatraz being led out of student leadership from San Francisco State University, including the leadership for the farm worker movement as well, and others just really positioning Silicon Valley as an idea and a concept in a space where there has been a lot of social and political leadership by communities of color. So I wanted to also mention and elevate that And I talk about it a lot in the work that I do, because that is the type of leadership that we really can look towards and not feel as alone, because other people have also created movements in spaces where they were challenged. So we can't let those things stop us, and we can always be inspired and encouraged by the people who laid foundations before us.
Thank you, Natalie. I think your words, and Danielle, your advice on these resources and things that they can do to get into these tech spaces is really going to be helpful and support their journey into tech. And so my last question is to understand how we can support you. So Danielle, let's go first. How can we support you?
Yeah, if you're interested in learning more about the STEAM Connection, you can check out our website at www.steamconnection.org. All of our socials are under the STEAM Connection, and all of my socials are under Danielle Boyer. This is a totally random thing, but I'm also working on an event on Indigenous futures with things like augmented reality and robotics, and I need help. If there's any interest or people who are experts in these fields, I want to hear from you. So be sure to check out my website and see if you want to get involved. Miigwech.
Thank you. Natalie, how can we support you?
The best way to support my work, I mean, I publish on and off on LinkedIn. I know that's not the best format. Most of people that are using, like, I think there's a big Native Indigenous community on TikTok and Instagram. So I probably should create some platform content. So Danielle, I might reach out to you and ask for your tips and tricks for that you have learned to create content. But I think that, yeah, one of my next steps, I think, is to really put myself out there and share some of the work that I'm doing in terms of increasing access to scholarships and internships, not just at Adobe, but in other companies as well, and leaning into those partnerships. So I would say at the moment, you can check out my website. You can look me up on Google, Natalie Contreras. So if you're a Indigenous person and you want to access different talks or resources or speaking engagements, I usually and typically will put those on my link tree. Anything from scholarship opportunities to, I know that there's been a couple scholarship programs for the Sundance, like Indigenous filmmakers community as well. So I would say I can share the URL for the link tree, and I put everything on there. So I'll go ahead and make sure it's updated when we share this out.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for your words. I really want to end our discussion with acknowledgement of the power and immense impact of your efforts in the tech space and on current and future generations of Indigenous youth. Thank you for your presence and persistence in this high-pressure environment that I know is exhausting, toxic, unwelcoming, yet beautiful and exhilarating. It is so inspiring to see you both change what tech should look like, and I cannot wait to see how you further impact our digital futures.
Thank you, April. I want to thank all three of you for the honesty and the forthrightness you've brought. I hope that our audience can be as inspired as I was by that conversation. So I really want to thank you for taking the time to join us. In addition, thank you to everyone that has attended and worked on our Youth in Action series and those that came before us to make this possible. If you want more information about upcoming Youth in Action episodes, as well as recordings of previous episodes, and to explore other ways you can enjoy the National Museum of the American Indian from home, visit us at americanindian.si.edu. Thank you very much.